What's up, guys? Nate here, the Hood Rat Racing Co. coming at you with another video. And to start off this episode of the Mustang restoration, we're going to talk about the plan for basically sealing off this rack here. So originally I was just going to put plugs in, but I realized that with the way these power racks work, they build up pressure inside themselves. So you'll either end up blowing the seals for like the steering shaft inside the rack, or you'll end up just blowing fluid past the plugs that you put in and it'll just leak. So to not have that happen, there's two ways you can do this. So if you feel like being adventurous, which I'm not doing, you can take apart your steering rack and take that plunger out. It'll probably be somewhere in here. You'll dismantle it, pull the shaft out, and there's going to be like a plunger looking thing, and it looks like it's press fitted onto that shaft. There is like a snap ring in front of it, but you'll just cut that off and reassemble it, and the rack will no longer build up pressure because that plunger pushes the fluid between each side of the rack for the steering assist. So if you do that, you don't have to do any of this. You can just plug off these lines. But I don't really care that much because I don't feel like taking apart this rack. So I'm just gonna loop the inlet and outlet hoses. So this would be a pretty simple thing, but what you're gonna need here is you're gonna need a 5/8 by 18 to 3/8 barb fitting, and then you're also gonna need a 9/16 to 18, or 9/16 by 18 to 3/8 barb fitting. Now, I had a really difficult time trying to find this guy. Nobody around here, local parts stores, hardware stores, nothing. Nobody has something like this. This is kind of like an uncommon thing. Very, I guess, vehicle specific, you could say. So I actually ended up being able to find this on Amazon. Sorry, there's a train going by. But yeah, I found this on Amazon. So I'll put the picture of it here so you guys can find it real quick. Now, as you can see, these don't go very far into the rack because the original lines that went in were steel lines. So they would go in and have like a bubble flare or some kind of seat basically to seal them so they didn't leak. But as you can see, this one, even though it's from China, it has a little O-ring seal on it, which we'll probably discard because it's just going to get destroyed anyway. But this one does not. I got this one from Advance Auto. I think they were the only ones I could find that had something like this. But yeah, pretty straightforward setup. So we got some 3/8 hose here, some hose clamps. Like I said, we're just going to loop it. This will keep pressure from building up in the rack, and it'll be relatively low pressure when you're turning the wheel anyway. So these should hold up just fine and shouldn't have any leaks. So what I'll probably do is put some Teflon tape on these just to help seal them up so they don't weep or anything like that, if there's a chance of that even, and we'll get it thrown in the car. So let me get these fittings in here and see how this works out. So the fittings are in, got them all tightened down. We did put some thread tape on both fittings just to help seal them up. Then we got our 3/8 hose installed here with some hose clamps, nothing too complicated. So I'll probably throw some tape on this hose just so it doesn't chafe on the K-member and put a hole in it. So it'll be a good long-term thing. You can see the hose doesn't have really a kink or anything in it, so it should work fine. Like I said, it's low pressure anyway, so I'm not really worried about it. And I know this isn't the cleanest option. You know, if I wanted to go crazy, I could get some new fittings and some steel line and make a hard line loop for it. But this will do fine. It'll last a good long while. And if I gotta throw another hose on it in 20 years because this one has a hole in it, you know, okay, go down to the hardware store, get a hose for $5. You know what I mean? It's not a big deal. So, like Dave Chappelle said, modern problems require modern solutions. And this is my modern solution.
Hello. Okay, so it's not that often that you see me in front of the camera, but got some cool stuff to share with you guys. So we finally have all of our components we're gonna need to upgrade the front brakes on the car. Now we're not going with anything crazy, just basically OEM plus for 79, 86 cars. Now for the longest time, you could not find anything aftermarket as far as like performance pads and rotors for a 79 to 86 car. You could for 87 and 93, they had, you know, options up the wazoo for performance pads and rotors, but never anything below 87. But powerstop started producing a kit. It's their Z26 Street Warrior kit, specifically for a 79 to 86 5-liter or 87 to 93 2.3 cars. Now, I'm not sure if the Aeronose cars use the same calipers as the early cars do, but the rotors are the same size, so that might be an option for you 4-cylinder guys. But like I said, Z26 Street Warrior kit ran me about 180 bucks off Rock Auto, shipped right to your door, right? To go with that, we have our new TRW tie rod ends, new wheel bearings, new wheel seals, picked up some grease, I painted the calipers, cleaned up all the hardware and whatnot. So we'll go over everything real quick and show you guys what we're working with. So these are the front rotors. They're cross drilled and slotted. Now I'm not a huge fan of slotted, or drilled, sorry, because under extreme heat conditions, they can start cracking, but I guess it really just depends how you're driving the car. Now for this being a basic street application, you know, cruising most of the time, more than anything else, these will be fine. So 10-inch rotor, vented, you know, standard Fox body stuff. So this will work perfectly for our setup, and we don't have to change spindles, no caliper changes, nothing. It's all just bolt on, ready to go. So 2 rotors. You also get power stops. These were carbon fiber ceramic, low dust, whatever. Show you this little thing real quick. I guess it's mirrored. So carbon fiber ceramic pads, thermal scorched, premium hardware, blah, blah, blah. But I'm excited because this is a kit I've been trying to find forever. So comes with new grease boots for your slide pins on the caliper, which is fantastic. They give you some grease for the pads, and then here's your pads. So nothing crazy, pretty generic looking, but should work perfectly because I honestly couldn't even tell you if you could get like an OEM set of ceramic pads. Everything I see is like metallic, so it is what it is. And then say we balled out on that stuff. I cleaned up the hardware, like the slide pins and the hardware for the wheel bearings themselves. So wheel seals, some grease. You can use a grease of your choice. We'll be using this high temp STP grease for today. It really don't matter. These bearings are cheap enough that I usually replace them every time I'm doing any kind of brake service, because I'm not sure what the actual service interval is, but like I said, they're cheap enough, so it really doesn't matter. You can, like, I don't know, change them however often you feel, and it's not really a big deal. But new tie rod ends, so we got those from TRW. Again, all of this stuff you can find on Rock Auto. I'm really not super in the hole on this whole setup here, so yeah, fairly simple. So let me show you the calipers real quick. Bam! So here's our new calipers. Just, you know, basic factory calipers. I replaced these about 6 years ago when I first got the car because the old ones were leaking and seized and whatnot, had their own issues. So I just started fresh, new calipers, new hoses, all fresh brake lines on the car. So just threw a quick coat of primer and paint on these, clean them up really nicely. I think they look nice for the car. It really goes with the whole black and blue theme of the car, which I'm really liking. And these will look nice on our powerstop brake kit as well. So I'm really excited for this because I can finally get the car back on the ground for the first time in months, as well as test fit the front wheels on the car that we have. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to show you guys this yet, but I'm definitely excited to test fit them. So definitely be sweet. So without further ado, let's get into it. Also, just a quick little update here. We have the dash and the steering column back in the car for good here. Nothing really too crazy. You didn't really do anything behind the dash. It was just kind of like pulled it out, set it aside, put it back in, just so we could go through and clean everything and put all the sound deadening material in. So steering shaft is hooked up, it's centered, so that's sweet. So I guess the first thing we'll do is we'll get our new tie rod ends put on, and then we can carry on. So let's get into it. All right, so we got the outer tie rod ends thrown on real quick. One thing to note, this isn't the first time I've had this happen. So both of the outer tie rods are the same, no matter what side they're for, at least for these cars. Sometimes you get one like, I'll just show you here. So as you can see, this tie rod, the inner tie rod is ran pretty far deep inside the inner. I'm not sure if it's because there were different K members and stuff throughout the years, but yeah, you have to run the inner tie rod ends pretty deep into the outers to get it like straight-ish. Now, it seems like sometimes you get it outer that the threads aren't cut all the way deep enough for. So like the passenger side went together like butter, no big deal whatsoever. But this side, I was basically finishing off cutting new threads into the very like middle of it because it just wasn't designed to thread that far in. So that is something you might have to watch out for, at least for the earlier cars. If you have a later model, you might not have this problem. But that's just something I've came across before on this car specifically. But nonetheless, our outer tie rod ends are on and tight. So I'll probably grease the ball joints and the tie rods up once we're all finished up here. But now we can get on to setting up our brakes. So I'll show you how to do that. All right, so before we can even really get into the nitty-gritty of it, we need to pack these bearings first so we can get our rotors prepped and get those put on. So basically, what you'll want to do, let me get my glove situated all the way here. Take whatever bearing you feel like doing first, and you're basically just gonna stick your hand in your tube of grease here like so, okay? Now you can get automatic packers to do this kind of thing, but this works just fine. So you're gonna take your bearing, put the race facing down, and you're gonna drag the bearing across your palm like so. And this is what's gonna pack the bearing full of grease. And I'll show you how it works here. So as you can see, I'm dragging it across our palm, and you see the grease starting to poke through. That's what you want. That means that part of the bearing is completely packed. So you just kind of want to keep going around the whole perimeter of your bearing and keep packing it like so until it's completely packed. And then I'll set it down, move on to the next one. So I definitely recommend wearing gloves doing this because this is a very, very, very messy little process here. And then any excess that will pack in the center while you're doing this, because it always does, you just scoop it back off and put it back in the center and keep packing accordingly. So it's not really a clean way to do it. This is just how you have to do it if you don't have the packing tool. So let me finish packing this one. Hopefully y'all can see how I'm doing this here. So, yeah, just keep packing her full. Like I said, it's pretty gross. But this is how you're supposed to do it. At least that's how Dad did it back in the day. So, you feel me? Yeah, you can see it's a greasy mess. But you know, that's how she does. So try to get not necessarily all the excess, but you want to reduce the layer here because you do have to put these in the rotor at some point. So just plop her down like that. All right, so now I'm going to show you how I installed these wheel seals. They're pretty easy, so I'll get right to it. So you're going to take your new bearing, plop her down in there, make sure it's fully seated in the race. All right. Try to keep everything as clean as possible. Don't want no grease slinging around, nothing like that, right? Now, a lot of people will tell you, find something that matches. You don't always have that. So I found that if you just be easy with the old girl, you can just send her home, like so. And it's a little bit of a pain at first because it's a painted surface, but once she starts going, you're pretty much smooth sailing here. That was probably a little shaky. I apologize. But seal is fully seated. No issues. So that's how you do it if you don't have a tool to press it in with. Alright, so now we're gonna put the rotor on. So I got a little bit of grease on here. And what you're essentially gonna wanna do first is take some grease and just go around where that wheel seal goes. You want that lubricated, you don't want that dry, because you'll prematurely wear out the wheel seal and then you'll have grease slinging everywhere, and that's not good. So just get a little grease on there, not a big deal. These are labeled, these are side specific. So as you can see, this one says front passenger side, and then the other one's front driver's side. So come in here, set it around, all right? Take your smaller bearing, goes in through the front. You might have to give her a little support to get her all the way in there, not a big deal. Take your washer, it's got a keyway on it, slide that on. All right, easy enough. Take your nut, put that on. Now, there is a specific way you are supposed to tighten these. I always just kind of do it by feel. It's kind of hard to describe. Yeah, I know there's grease on the threads and whatnot. It's not a big deal, because it all gets locked in with a cotter pin. So, not a big deal. So now you'll kind of just spin the rotor, see how much it's dragging. And you'll kind of want to find like a spot where there's a decent amount of preload, right? Because you don't want it super tight. So you'll kind of feel it start increasing on drag. So you'll kind of like back off. It's like you kind of like snug it up and then you back it off like maybe a quarter of a turn. And that's enough to get you started, but it's still tight, you know what I mean? So then you take this little cap piece here. Make sure you don't lose any of this front hardware, because I don't know if you can get replacements. So if it doesn't line up with the cotter pin, just go to the next hole, it'll line up, right? Take your cotter pin here, pop her on through, and then I like using cutters. They kind of just grab these cotter pins a little bit easier, and I'll just fold them back like so. Now you do want to kind of fold these tight to the spindle here, because you need clearance for your dust cap. So just FYI. Just bend them like inwards. Not a big deal. All right. See, this one has a dent in it. It's a little older, but that's okay. It still works fine. Sometimes they'll just pop in, like that one did. Sometimes you have to go around the edge here with a flathead and kind of knock it back in, but you never want to hammer here. Somebody had done this before. I never replaced this one. This is original to the car, and yeah, I was like, whatever. So easy enough. But our rotors are now fully installed here. Let me rip this out. Fully installed, nice and minty. Powerstop Z26 Street Warrior kit. So I think now we can get the calipers on and then do some test fitting on the wheels. All right, so we got the front brakes completely installed. Everything looks great, should work phenomenally. I did test with the steering wheel lock to lock, and the lines don't interfere with anything at all. They're not pulled super taut, nothing like that. I will have to put a piece of hose or something on the passenger side, unless it has something like this on it that I can move, because it does get a little close to the cable member. I don't want it to chafe on it. Now, I did try and start bleeding the brakes last night. Got some fluid in here, but went to start on the right rear and things didn't exactly go our way. So I'll show you here. Yeah, bleeder screw just snapped right off. So we have a new wheel cylinder here. I'm a little bummed because these wheel cylinders are probably only about 4 or 5 years old.
so I'm not sure if it's just operator error or what, but it is what it is. Things happen. So picked up another one for like 17 bucks. So we're gonna get that swapped out and try again. All right, so got the old wheel cylinder out. Just a quick little change, nothing crazy. So I went through, made sure all the other bleeder screws will open, and they do, so should be good to go. All right, so as you can see by the puddles on the floor, brakes are all bled, everything's good. Shout out to my amazing girlfriend. They came out here and helped me bust all this out. Couldn't do it without you. So yeah, everything's mint. The front brakes work great, rear brakes work fantastic, but they're drums, so they always work. So yeah, steering is all complete. Front suspension is like 90% complete. Still got to figure out a sway bar, but that can wait. I can throw that on at any time. Brakes are complete and bled. Everything is great. Pedal is rock hard. Like, it was pretty stiff before with the stock setup, but man, this is night and day compared to what it was. So I'm excited to see how this will hold up in real driving conditions. Now I know that I'm limited by like rudder size, pad size, tires, things of that nature. But as far as capabilities, this will be a pretty good setup. And if I do decide to upgrade to 5-lug disc all the way around down the road, I don't have to change any of this. This is all ready to go. And I still have my aftermarket proportioning valve to use. So all I really need to do is change each brake system on each corner, and that's good. If I even go that route. But I got some new lug nuts coming tomorrow, so I'll do a test fit with the new wheels, set the car on the ground for the first time, and I'll throw the front fenders on, see how everything fits as far as fitment goes, and we'll go from there. So I'm pretty excited to see this thing on the ground for the first time in months, and can't wait to see it with these wheels. So I hope you guys are excited as I am. But yeah, once we get all that stuff done, I'll kick things back off and show you guys what we got. So some good news today. We went to the local junkyard. Well, not so local to me, but close enough. And I scored this huge front sway bar from an 89 notchback. Now, it was a 5-liter automatic car. As far as I can tell, this doesn't look like a stock sway bar. It's pretty beefy, but this will save us about $300 for a new one. So all I got to do is order bushings and links, and we'll be good. Now, I do have the new wheels test fitted on the car. I think they look phenomenal. So without further ado, I think I'm going to show you the grand reveal. All right, guys, so here we are. We got the wheels test fitted on the car. Now, these are Koenig rewinds. They are a 15x7 all the way around. They are a 4x1 14.3 bolt pattern. Unfortunately, Koenig never made these in a 4x108, which is kind of a bummer. That's okay. So I ended up ordering some wheel adapters and lug nuts to make it all work. Pretty simple and straightforward. Fitment isn't horrible. The front's got a decent amount of poke to it, so we'll have to see if we can remedy that somehow. But the rear actually sits really nicely. Pretty flush little look to it, so I can dig it. Now, what led me to start taking interest in these wheels is the Predator Mustangs that Shelby American did back in the 80s. Had like a mini light / Watanabe style wheel on it, and I thought they looked absolutely killer. And it's not really a wheel you see like on American cars, let alone Fox bodies. So I thought it'd be a cool little old school touch. Plus it matches like the VTA style that I'm going for. So I really dig it. I love these wheels. They look so good. They're not perfect, but I mean, for the price I paid for them, I cannot complain one bit. The only thing that was a bummer was when I got the wheels, they didn't have any center caps. So what I did was basically you measure with a caliper the center bore of the wheel, and then you take that number and you're trying to find a center cap that matches that measurement, whether it's a steel trailer style center cap like this or an actual plastic one, whatever you want it to be. Basically, it's up to you now. So I just got trailer center caps, and then I got some Koenig emblems off eBay and made it work like that, and I think they look great. It just gives it that nice little old school touch, makes it look vintage. But yeah, absolutely love them. So car's on the ground for the first time in months.
Now there is a few things I wanted to do before I complete this video, such as redoing the sway bar. I snagged the brackets, so I'm gonna get new bushings, new end links, and I'll repaint the mounts and the sway bar itself, and we'll get it put back in the car. I also noticed that the brakes were dragging a little bit after I bled everything and got it working, so I might have too much of like a preload on the booster to the master, so I'll probably have to pop the master off and shorten it just a little bit, and then see how that goes. But we definitely don't want dragging brakes right off the rip. So we got a few more things that will get done. So like I said, the sway bar, I do want to paint the rear drums, make it all new and shiny and pretty. And that'll probably conclude this episode. And then the next episode, we'll start ripping into the motor, getting that taken care of. So yeah, I got some parts on the way, so stay tuned. All right, so as you can see, we got the drums painted. Now, we've been talking a lot about the front suspension setup on this car, but we've never really gone over the rear. So just to get you up to speed with everything on the whole car, we're going to cover that real quick. So starting with the rear end itself, we upgraded from a 7.5 with 327s to a 88 with 410s and an LSD. Now, the 410s are a little bit of overkill, and seeing as though this rear end is kind of on its way out, the backlash is up at like a mile, it knocks, it's got a clunk. It does have a whine and a vibration. We'll probably end up rebuilding that at some point and stepping down to like a 373, a little more highway friendly. These are the stock 9-inch drums that would come on a 7.5 4-cylinder car, or it might even be like any 7.5. But they came with like a 9-inch drum. I think it's like 9 3/4 or something like that, or it might be just 9-inch. But we kept this layout because I had already had all the new parts and refreshed everything. So it didn't make sense to spend all that money refreshing these 9-inch drums to go to a 10-inch drum and spend more money in refreshing all that. The drums, they're not really all that great anyway. So we'll just stick with what we got until we decide to really upgrade down the road. Now, I am looking at like a rear disc brake conversion, and I can still keep it 4-lug. And if we end up going that route, then we'll switch everything over. But for now, this setup works great. This is still laid out as the 4-cylinder braking system. So instead of having the hose that comes down on the driver's side of the axle housing like the 8.8s would use on a V8 dual exhaust car, we kept the single exhaust layout where the lines actually come over the passenger side and mount on the axle tube with the vent bolt. So we did have to turn it to make it clear the tailpipe. As you can see, the tailpipe's pretty close to it, but it is hanging right now. It doesn't ever really come that close, but we still have clearance because I did have a problem with the tailpipe smacked the right rear brake line and it ripped itself out of that fitting. So to correct that, we just kind of jiggled everything and kind of kicked it over a notch just to give it some clearance, and I haven't had any issues since. But very simple suspension setup. We have J&M upper and lower rear control arms. We have Prothane's polyurethane axle bushings where the uppers mount to the axle housing. So that's all been gone through. Eibach rear sport line springs that we did cut just to get the fitment a little bit better. KYB rear shocks. So pretty basic setup, nothing crazy. Now, I did all this last year when I actually replaced that lower torque box here. This is a Racecraft Engineering rear torque box. Pretty beefy unit. It does have 3 different spots to mount the rear lower control arm too. So if you're trying to dial in suspension setup, you do have that available to you. But seeing as this was just basically a stock layout car, I wasn't planning on going with anything super wild on this. The middle hole, which is like your stock OEM hole, works fine. So pretty basic setup here. Like I said, nothing too crazy, but the setup does work. The rear of the car is absolutely glued to the road. And I don't have a rear sway bar, as you could probably see. Suspension articulation was a big thing I was worried about when I was setting this up. Now, I might throw one on down the road, but for now, this setup works great. I really don't have any body roll issues with the rear of the car. It's all up front, which we'll get into in a second. But like I said, this setup works. Even with the Cooper Cobras on the back, which are okay tire, but they're not meant for like, you know, serious racing or like touring or anything like that. Car's planted. It doesn't try to slide out. It doesn't sidestep. You don't really feel the rear end wandering around underneath the car either. It's actually pretty tight. Now, if I want to further, correct any of those issues and improve, Obviously, like a pan hard bar from like Griggs Racing or Maximum Motorsports would probably be the way to go. But for what we got going on, this setup works great and it's not too extreme. Now, as far as the front goes, we've been throwing all these new parts on and really dialing this thing in. We didn't have a front sway bar for the longest time, so the front of the car would roll really hard entering into a corner. But part of that, in my eyes, 50-50 is like 50% the front sway bar just not being there, and second is the tires just rolling super hard. Those tires do roll really hard, so maybe we'll get a nice set of tires all the way around, and that'll definitely make some improvements. But as far as the suspension setup goes, it's pretty basic. But it just works, it's proven, and I'm happy with it. I think the car performs phenomenally for what it is and for being on a pretty tight budget. So, no reason to overcomplicate it if you don't have to. So now I'll go out and show you the front sway bar here. I do have new bushings and new end links on the way. So when those get here, we can put this in the car. So for our no-name front sway bar, because I still have no idea what brand it is, even if it might be a stock one, I don't know. It is a 33 millimeter sway bar. I do have new bushings coming for it. So like I said, we just cleaned it up, primered it, threw some paint on it, and it looks great. So like I said, when all the new parts get here, that'll go back on the car and should help a lot with the suspension setup up front. Definitely stiffen some things up. And it'll test our repairs on our frame rails to, it should really put them through the ringer, and we'll see, if our repairs were up to snuff or not. But yeah, it's coming together. So I still have a couple little things I need to do. Like I need to but I need to cover the front hoses on the front calipers. And I also need to cover this hose off the rack here just to keep everything from chafing on the K-member, because we want this setup to last. So that'll be one of the next few things I do. I do need to get new hardware to mount the sway bar mounts to the frame rails. And then I also need to get hardware to mount like the MSD box and the MSD tack box and everything like that, so the car works and everything. Because I will be mounting everything under the fender apron, because we're going to try and run the Scott rod panels here. So obviously there won't be any room. But I just got a lot going on. So I'll probably catch up with you guys when the new parts get here and we get the front sway bar put on. And by then we should have all our hoses covered. And I did confirm, I need to adjust the push rod off the booster and shorten it a little bit, because we do have brake drag because of that. The front and rear brakes are dragging, so we'll have to address that. But so just like I said, wanted to get you guys up to speed on the whole thing. I'll let you guys know when the parts get here. Alrighty, so we have been up and at it, working on this thing. So as you can see, we have our 6AL box, our tack adapter, and our 6-channel fuse block mounted to the outside of the fender apron now. And I tried to go with like a smaller profile fastener, just so if we do end up running the Scott Rods panels, we won't really have any interference. I might have a little something here up top, but I could probably figure something out for that. But I think it came out great. Obviously, I still haven't done anything with the wiring, as well as the rest of the harness here, but we'll integrate everything as we move farther along, especially once we get the motor like in the car. That'll really help like kind of figuring out where everything goes and whatnot, because I need a refresher on that one. But for the sway bar, we paid $25 for it from the junkyard. So I got the original mounting brackets in this hulking monstrosity of a front sway bar. And then we went on Rock Auto and got I think it's FVP's 33 millimeter sway bar bushings, and then Mevo Tech's heavy duty sway bar links. So $25 plus like another, we'll say $30 in links and bushings. So for a $55 setup versus like a $300 and something setup is what we would have had to pay for everything new, if not more. We definitely scored big time on that. And the bushings for the Mevo Tech links are blue, so it matched, which is sweet. But it looks killer. I'm sure it's going to perform killer. So I'm pretty excited about that. And this basically completes our whole saga of getting the front suspension and like the front end of the car done. So now we can start moving on to the motor. But I'll probably start on that in the next video, just because I'm sure this one's already getting long. But man, we're slowly knocking it out. I was able to get a hold of another gentleman, because the first dude kind of ghosted me about getting this rocker panel, that patch panel we need. So if we can rock that out, we'll be one step closer to painting this car. But yeah, it's coming together. I'm pretty excited about it. This freaking sway bar is huge. Man, that's going to make a difference. I can't wait to drive this thing again. I miss it. But yeah, we've been knocking it out. So yeah, as you can see, we're also throwing the Yankees back on. I didn't want to keep these on the car, especially when we paint it. Probably just rather do these because these are already dusty and dirty. So any overspray that could get on them will just wash right off. But yeah, I'll probably throw the front wheels on, get this back on the ground. Another thing I found out too, which is nice, when I replaced these hoses, they actually came with like a little rubber sleeve on them. So I just kind of moved them into position so that if they do come in contact with the K-member, as you can see, this one's a little closer. Even if it does come into contact with the K-member here, it's not going to rub through the hose. So that's nice. I also put a piece of heat tape on the little loop on our power steering rack down there, just because I don't want the exhaust melting it. And the heat tape has a little bit of thickness to it, so if it rubs on the K-member, again, it's not going to wear a hole through it. But yeah, man, I'm so excited. But I appreciate you guys sticking around, this far into the restoration, and thank you for tuning into this episode. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Whatever you guys want to see, let me know in the comments, or any questions, concerns. I greatly appreciate your feedback. But yeah, thanks again, guys, and I'll catch you in the next video.